The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
The strike at Amazon growing. Two major facilities join the picket lines. Meanwhile, union leaders in Germany reach a deal with Volkswagen to cut 35,000 jobs. And today on the show, it's the president of the Mine Workers Union and the executive director of Blue Cross and Blue Shield's National Labor Office. Welcome to the Wednesday, December 25th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And as I indicated on the show yesterday, what we're doing this week and next is featuring some of the best shows of America's Workforce. And today we're going to start off with Cecil Roberts. In fact, we interviewed Cecil on New Year's Day of this year, New Year's Day 2024. Cecil, a 6th-generation coal miner, became president of the union October 22nd, 1995. After serving as vice president since December of 1982. He served in Vietnam, decorated combat vet, very passionate about veteran affairs and also about his members, too. And I'll tell you, he is a true fighter when it comes to black lung. If you go to UMWA.org, you can see a lot of information about what they're doing. What we talked about in that episode, well, 2 things. Warrior Met, that was a fight that went on for about 2 years, and they tried everything to boycott the company, but they were dealing with a hedge fund, kind of like a faceless group of individuals on Wall Street. He'll speak to that, and he's also going to talk about the dangers of silica dust, and there was a new rule by the Mine Safety and Health Administration that helped out a lot of the workers dealing in the coal mines with silica dust. And he's going to explain what that's all about. I learned a lot. And anybody that talks to Cecil will learn a lot. This guy's amazing. Again, a 6th-generation coal miner. Our second guest on the show is Merrilee Logue. And we have Merrilee on a regular basis. She's one of the sponsors here on behalf of Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office. And in this episode, which goes back to January, she talks about the history of the blues, which was founded as a solution to support labor accounts. In 1929, Blue Cross was created to support teachers down in Texas. And the concept grew out of the lumber and mining camps of the Pacific Northwest. And the goal was to provide medical care at an affordable rate for employees, which we're trying to do today, right? The National Labor Office, now, they were established back in 1965 to demonstrate the commitment to labor meaning unionized employees in Taft-Hartley funds, both private and public sector. So Merrilee will be our second guest right here on the best of America's Workforce. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You know, since Amazon workers began striking last Thursday, workers at 2 major facilities have joined the picket line. Workers at KBSD in San Bernardino, California, which is Amazon's largest West Coast air hub, walked off the job at noon on Saturday. Aidan Hewitt, a worker at the facility, said in a statement, "We don't want to be on the picket line right around the holidays, but Amazon left us no other option. The company has shown time and time again that they will not improve how they treat us unless we fight." And that's exactly what we're doing. Workers at JFK 8 in Staten Island, New York, the only Amazon facility where workers have won a union election, joined the walkouts as well. Now, since their victory, which goes back to 2022, Amazon has refused to bargain with the workers there. The company's anti-union tactics in the lead up to the election formed the factual basis, by the way, for the Labor Board's major decision, which came last month, banning captive audience meetings. Let's hope that that continues with the new administration. After a marathon, 70-hour negotiation, yeah, that would be a marathon, Volkswagen and union leaders reached a deal to cut 35,000 jobs, not right away, by 2030. Approximately 1/4 of the automaker's German workforce. Now, despite the cost-cutting measures, union leaders hailed the agreement as a win. They even called it a Christmas miracle, given that Volkswagen backed off from plant closures, immediate layoffs, and a proposed 10% wage cut. So it could have been worse. The head negotiator for IG Metall, which is Germany's most powerful union, said the cuts would be, quote, done in a socially responsible manner. Now, the deal follows 2 strikes over the past month, encompassing about 100,000 VW employees, and responds to concerns about the company's fiscal state in the face of very stiff competition from Chinese automakers and the softening demand, which is happening right across Europe. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I mean a quick break, and we'll be back with Cecil Roberts as part of the Best of America's Workforce. Cecil, the president of the United Mine Workers Union.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulators50.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process. This portion of the show is brought to you by Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Labor's trusted health partner, bringing people, communities, and care together to transform the future of health. For more information, please visit anthem.com/labor and trust. The Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 iron worker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great iron worker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com. This portion of the show brought to you by the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. For more information, please visit bacweb.org. Melwood is a dynamic nonprofit organization providing jobs and great opportunities for people with disabilities. And they do this through strategic partnerships with the federal government, unions, and community partners. Melwood is all about advancing economic independence for workers with disabilities, and they've been doing this for more than 60 years in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. Learn more about Melwood by visiting their website, melwood.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
So let's go to line number one and welcome a newcomer to the show. I think you know the name. This guy's a fighter. A sixth-generation coal miner, one of the labor movement's most stirring and sought-after union leaders. I'm talking about Cecil Roberts, who's been president of the United Mine Workers since 1995. He was elected vice president in December of 1982. Comes out of Vietnam, works in the coal mines, and just worked his way up to the top. Cecil Roberts, it is an honor to have you on America's Workforce. How are we doing today, my brother?
We're doing well, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry we've missed each other over the past few years, but thank you.
Well, you know what? Let's be honest. I was trying to track you down during the Warrior Met strike and or lockout, whatever that was. I mean, it was brutal, and it went on for almost 2 years, but I know you did your best there. And I mean, there were many, many protests, and we covered it extensively here on America's Workforce. And if you don't mind, is there anything new to add to that? I mean, they weren't getting anywhere, and we talked about that a lot because here's what happened. This is what happened in all over America. You got these Wall Street hedge funds that buy up companies. They know nothing about the business. All they care about is making money. I mean, greed wins in all of these battles here. But anything you knew that you could add to that right now, sir?
Well, we still have this decision that was rendered by the National Labor Relations Board, and I think this is something all of labor should be thinking about here as we move forward, because this could be the case for everybody that faces something like this. So you take on a company that's got more money than you could ever imagine, backed by Wall Street investors that has more money than the United States government, and the state police and the governor and 2 sheriff's departments. And, you know, I guess it's about an even fight when you get all that up on the table. But the National Labor Relations Board is on our side, supposedly. But before the strike started, we realized this company wasn't really trying to get a collective bargaining agreement. They were just stalling. And remember, 5 years earlier, the workers had given up $1 billion in concessions to help get this new company started, supposedly. And the new company, obviously, was these folks from Wall Street wearing a mask, calling themselves something else. But in order to retain their jobs, our members' jobs, and in order to hopefully have a future down there and keep the union there, by the way. A lot of people don't realize in bankruptcy court, the union can go away very easily and the workers can be fired. They don't call it fired. They just say you're not working here anymore. But we were able to keep the people working and keep the union there with the promise that 5 years later we'd restore these benefits and wages, and that was a lie. Then we get to the end of the contract and we start bargaining with this group. And at the end of the day, we couldn't reach an agreement before expiration. And we filed unfair labor practices for their failure to bargain in good faith. And unfortunately, we struck 2 years and never had a decision from the National Labor Relations Board Administrative Law Judge until we decided we needed to put people back to work because so many of our members had given up the strike and left. And if you can imagine being on strike 2 years, even though we were paying enormous amounts of money in weekly benefits to the strikers, anywhere from $400 to $500 a week, depending on their participation, and providing them with health care. We invested $35 million of our money in this strike. And we never received a decision back from the administrative law judge, even though we filed these charges before we ever went on strike, until we made the offer to go back to work. So we're 2 years in, and we get a decision saying this company had not bargained in good faith. Now the question becomes, though, what do you do with that? And generally in court of law, you'd be rewarded payments or something, or somebody go to jail or whatever. We're sitting here asking the National Labor Relations Board, well, what do we get out of this? Don't the workers get some money here, benefits? Doesn't the strike fund get money back that we paid out when we've already determined, the board has, not the board, but the administrative law judges determined that these people violated the law. We're sitting here waiting on some answer to that. It looks like all we're going to get out of this is some kind of an order saying they got to go back to the table and bargain in good faith. That chance of that, we need some teeth in what goes on at the National Labor Relations Board and with the laws that are in place. Plus, we need labor law reform. And I'm one of these somewhat radical people that go all the way back to 1947. And let me just say what one of my predecessors said about Taft-Hartley, and that predecessor was John L. Lewis. This is the first ugly thrust of fascism in America. And guess what? It was and it is, and we've been living with this ever since. We had a brief period of time, as you know, from 1935 to 1947, when we actually had a right to bargain in this country, a right to organize in this country. We lost that in 47. Been trying to restore what we had in 35 ever since, and we're nowhere near that. We got all these right to work laws that stem from that. But right now, I believe that adjustments could be made internally to deal with this problem of when a company just says, well, we won't break the union. We're not going to broadcast that, but that's what we're doing here. Either let us keep all these concessions and the workers never get their $1 billion in benefits back, or the union's got to go away, and we're going to have a lot of help doing that from Wall Street. We're going to have a lot of help doing that from the state police and county sheriffs from 2 different counties and the governor's office. And by the way, the state judge down there who actually issued an injunction that said we couldn't be within 900 feet of an entrance to Warrior Met's property. Now, those are some rules that are hard to win. How to have a victory, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You have all that against you. But the last thing to happen in this is after we asked people to go back to work, we finally got a decision, but that was after the fact. And now we're sitting here with this decision we've had now for, I guess, a few months. So where's the teeth of the decision? So that's pretty much where we are with this.
And how are the workers handling this right now, Cecil?
Well, let me tell you what's happened here. As you might guess, we have 2 other union mines in Alabama. And as time went on, more and more of the strikers went to one of these 2 companies and asked to be hired, and they were, and we encouraged that. There's no good reason for people who could be making $75,000 to $100,000 a year to stay on the strike when strike breakers, by the way, were brought in from all over the country. We had strike breakers from Utah, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Tennessee, and West Virginia. So it's kind of ironic when you think about it. You had the government in Alabama escorting people from out of state across the picket lines to take the jobs of people in Alabama. But what happened here is attrition got the better of us as time went on and people's bills mounted up, and these strike breakers being escorted in and out of the property by the government itself. They found jobs elsewhere. Many of them found jobs in these 2 union mines that were still operating in Alabama. And we've got about a couple hundred of people who withstood all of this and went back to work when we asked them to. So, and this is not a coincidence. As soon as we sent people back to work, there was an effort to decertify the union there, led by the company, of course, but they denied any involvement in this, and that's all BS, as you could guess. And that's not going anywhere right now because the charges are, and the complaint happens to be with preventing that from going forward. So it's a legal fight that any of us could find ourselves in until we get some fairness and some labor law reform and some stronger decisions back from administrative law judges who look at these situations and realize what it is. But even ruling in the union's favor, it sometimes doesn't give you what you need to protect workers.
No. And while that strike went on, the price of coal goes up, and the company, Warrior Met, made even more money. I mean, that's the crazy thing about this.
The price of coal went up to $500 a ton, and this is all being shipped overseas, by the way, and because we don't make steel, or we make steel in this country, but not like we used to. We import steel that used to be produced here in the United States, so we ship the metallurgical coal out of the country, and there was such a demand that during the time of this strike that the price shot through the roof. I've never seen prices like this, and neither has anyone else, whether they're on the union side of the economics or on the company side. No one's ever seen prices go up like that.
Cecil Roberts joining us on our live line, president of the United Mine Workers. UMWA.org is a national website. We'll continue with him. We have to talk about the plight of workers and the safety of workers and what they are breathing. That story next, back in a few minutes.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
Let's go back to our live line and rejoin Cecil Roberts, sixth-generation coal miner, president of the United Mine Workers. He's had that position since 1995. Is it right that when Trumka left the miners' union, you took over? And I know he come from the miners' union. Is that right?
That's correct. He and I are, of course, very good friends, and we ran together in 1982. He's president, I was vice president. John Vandervick ran as secretary-treasurer. And we unseated an incumbent president and his team, which is pretty much unheard of in these times. And by the way, we have a different way of holding elections than in most unions. We do not elect people at our convention. You've got to convince the local unions throughout the country and in Canada. And first of all, in a nominating process, you've got to get 20% of the locals to support you. Then you stand for election before everyone else. I say we, my team, I've been very fortunate. We haven't had opposition since I took over. We've always won the elections in the nominating process. No one's ever tried to actually run against us.
Yeah, we've had Rich on the show a number of times, and he always talked about coming from the miners' union. He had some fond memories there, and I know he did a lot of work, and he had a lot of respect for you and all the people in the miners' union. And that goes along with Bill Samuel. Bill Samuel, you probably know him, government affairs director.
Oh, yeah, he came out of Mine Workers, too.
Yeah, he worked with Rich, and he's a regular on our show. Maybe you'll be a regular
really?
here.
Next time he's on, tell him I say hello.
I will do that. Yeah. We're trying to get all unions on this. I mean, and we're making this. I have to tell you, this show exploded. It really has. At the beginning of 2023, we were like at 15 to 20% of all podcasts, and now we're in the top 1%. There's a lot of people that want to hear the working side The stories of the miners, the stories of those in the steel industry, the stories of the Teamsters, the UAW, you name it. I mean, these are workers' stories. We want to hear from the people that have rank in the unions because they're close to the membership and they know what's going on in the field. And we know what's going on in America with these Wall Street hedge funds. They've hollowed out the middle class. They really have over the years. I mean, I come from the broadcasting industry. I saw that happen when they consolidated all the broadcasters. And, what used to be 200 people in a group is now down to maybe 20. And technology has a lot to do with that as well. Hey, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I want to talk about the miners and what's going on with this silica dust, which is, and it's affecting a lot of young miners. And I understand, I guess the government has been looking into this, and there's been some movement in the right direction here. But Cecil, I'm going to let you pick it up from there. What's happening in the fields right now?
Let me lay somewhat of a foundation for the conversation. Most people may not know this, but it wasn't until 1969 that our government recognized pneumoconiosis, or what's most commonly referred to as black lung, as an occupational illness. And there was no such thing as compensation for having black lung. Back in the early days, coal miners knew something was wrong because it wasn't unusual at all for a coal miner to die in his early 50s, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Now, what we're dealing with now is a new form of black lung. When I say a new form, there's been this, what they call progressive massive fibrosis. Now, that's a medical term, but let's set that aside for a moment. With the decline in the coal industry and the length of time we've been mining coal in the United States of America has led to this problem. This problem exists primarily in eastern Kentucky, southern West Virginia, and southwestern Virginia. You can draw the circle probably 7,500 miles around there, and that you will find most cases with this advanced form of black lung. When you contract what they call progressive massive fibrosis, we're going to set that outside for a second. We don't need the medical term any longer. You may not live any longer than 3 to 5 years. There's no cure for this except a lung transplant. Once this silica that comes from dust from rock as opposed to coal, the coal seams are thinner now because a lot of the good coal in those 3 areas identified has already been mined. And if you're mining coal in those areas right now, you're mining in some very thin seams. Low coal have to take rock above that in order to extract the coal. When the machine cuts into that rock, it creates rock dust that has silica in it. And these miners have been inhaling this silica. Now, this is not something that people were unaware of. Remember that. I testified in 2019 in the United States Congress about this. And Congress was aware of this well before I testified in 2019. The medical community that works with coal miners and with black lung, and all of the activists out there in the black lung associations that we have throughout the country, and the union in those areas, we have been raising this issue for years now. When 35 and 40-year-old men can't work anymore because their lungs are destroyed. There was a CBS segment on this on Sunday morning, and they had, I think the miner was 35, and his lungs were just destroyed. And he had what he said was advanced stages of black lung, which is true. It goes along with the medical term I just used a couple of times. And he is facing perhaps dying from this if they don't find a lung for him, because there's no cure for this. And by the way, the cost of a lung transplant here is going to approach somewhere around $1 million. So you can see what the problem is here. It's terrible expense to try to save someone's life, there's very little can be done other than make this matter comfortable. And you can still walk around, but you can't do any kind of activity that would require you to have your heart rate go up, move around like we may be walking up steps. So more and more miners have been contracting this, and we finally were able to convince MSHA, which is the Mine Health and Safety Administration, to promulgate a rule that would deal with this silica problem. And by the way, the rest of the country has a silica standard. And what we basically were just asking for is the same kind of a standard for people who are working in a more dusty area, contracting a more dangerous type of black lung, and dying at very alarming high rates from this. And we finally get the rule promulgated. But guess what? There are actually people in Congress who are saying we don't want the MSHA to be putting this rule in place. So we're actually going to propose amending this rule to say that funding cannot be used in order to correct this problem with silica. And that's what's happened recently in our United States Congress, and probably within the last month. And for the life of me, I cannot understand how any member of Congress can say, well, we don't want to save anybody's life here. No, we do want to save the coal companies some money. So we're going to stand up for the coal companies' money as opposed to the coal miners' life. But just remember, it was 1969 before this country even ever came to grips with this. And the reason for that was the power of the coal companies, the power of their lobbyists up on Capitol Hill. It shouldn't be shocking, I assume, that people would be brazen enough might be the better word, to stand up in the House of Congress and say, we don't want to fund this new rule, and we want to prevent MSHA from implementing this rule. It just amazes me that we still have these type of folks in Congress. Now, is this going to be successful, this effort to stop coal miners from having a safe place to work, a healthy place to work? I doubt it, but it's going to prolong it. And every day that goes by, there's a 30-year-old coal miner sucking this dust down in their lungs, and it's going to get sick from it and going to die from it before the age of 45.
And for those of you who are listening, we're not talking about coal dust here. This is the rock that they're drilling through. That's where the silica dust is coming from. Cecil, I have to ask you, is there any protective gear on the market that can help the miners out on this? I mean, that sounds like a common sense thing. Isn't that being utilized right now that they know what's going on?
There are like dust masks that you can wear and things of that nature, but you're not going to prevent. Do you even prevent coal dust? I believe I used to wear a mask all the time when I was running shuttle car. So I'm not a guy that's never been at a coal mine. It's been 5.5 years in a coal mine. But with respect to this silica, it's a hard thing to deal with. Now, they also have devices like helmets you can put on them, but let me speak to that for a second. If you're remember this is in low coal seams, that means that you can't stand up in most of them, right? And you're bent way over trying to get from one place to another. It's almost impossible to wear one of those helmets in mine coal. I mean, it creates another type of danger walking around, looking and being able to see what's going on around you. Actually, you're kind of down to a narrow, probably a device that was created maybe 50 years ago, dust mask, and that fits tightly around your face. But keeping out silica, there's no guarantees here. You can wear one of those all day, in my opinion, every minute that you're underground, and you can still contract this illness.
So Cecil, right now, to cut to the chase, miners are suffocating and dying, and they're young, too. You mentioned somebody that was 35 years of age.
Yes, that was just on Saturday morning.
And the people in Congress really don't seem to care. At least some of them, and they're stopping funding.
I don't know how many congressmen or women we have that's taken this position, but we know some have because it's already been raised by a person named Scott Perry out of Pennsylvania.
And what has he said about it?
No, he's the one that wants to amend the funding for MSHA to prohibit them to use any money in order to implement this standard.
Okay. Scott Perry, Republican out of Pennsylvania. So what are you doing right now? Obviously, you got a lot of members here. I mean, and what do we need to do here on America's Workforce to get this point across to Mr. Perry?
Well, let me tell you how we also, this might be hard for people to believe, but we never had a law in the United States with respect to the health and safety of coal miners. We never had a law about how much roof support you had to have, how much air you had to have. We never had a law that dealt with gases in the mines until 1969. We wouldn't have it then. It had not been for an explosion that took place near Fairmont, West Virginia, in Marion County, when 78 miners lost their lives in 1968 in the blink of an eye when a terrible explosion took place there. And the only reason that we were able to do something about this then, we'd had a lot worse accidents in the past. Thinking back to 1906, 361 coal miners died in the blink of an eye, and this country didn't do anything about it. Explosion after explosion down through the years, killing hundreds and hundreds of miners at a time. Nothing ever happened. But because of television, we were able to, when I say we, pressure was placed on Congress to do something about this because people in California watched this on television. People in New York watched this on television. Now, what can we do to help? We have a similar situation here through your good efforts here to want to know what's going on, and your listeners should be involved in this. Every listener you have, in my opinion, wants all workers to return home safely. When I say safely, uninjured, at the work site, right? We also don't want people walking home, they're coming home every night or every day that's inhaled something that's going to eventually kill them. We know in this country people die from cancer. They contract it at the workplace. They have white lung, brown lung, black lung. There are so many people that die every single year. I chaired a health and safety committee at the AFL-CIO, and the number of people who die every year from illnesses that they've contracted on at the work site. Now, some of these workers, they die when they retire. Some of them get sick while they're working. But the real issue here is dying from something that happened, you contracted at the workplace, and that shouldn't be the case in the United States. So if people want to be helpful, whoever your congressman is, whoever your congresswoman is, whoever your senator is, every one of them, I don't care if they're Republicans, Democrats, liberals, or conservatives, and anybody in between, we should stand in this country for a safe working place for people. My goodness, look where we are, what year this is. This is not 1860 when we first started mining coal in the United States. And we can cure this problem by simply requiring a dust standard that deals with silica so that miners will not be exposed to this. And so what that means is the coal companies have to make sure that silica is at a safe level for workers to be working in that environment. And so it's up to the companies to control this. And if they do not, there's got to be a penalty imposed on them. One of the problems with the rule, and we've commented on this to MSHA, we can no longer allow coal companies to police themselves here. Now, when MSHA comes into the mine and finds something wrong, they can shut the mine down. And they can fine the company. And in some instances, if it's bad enough, people could be fined enormous amounts of money. But in between visits by MSHA, the coal companies are in charge. But most coal companies, to be fair here, comply with the law because they don't want their miners to die because they're heavily invested in that.
Right.
But some companies, all they're looking for is how much coal they get out today. They're not worrying about tomorrow, and they're not worrying about workers' health. And every time there's a new rule or a new law, you hear the same thing. Oh, it's going to put us out of business. That's what you always hear, and it never has. And all you have to do is look from 1969, after the law was passed, a lot more miners are alive today than they would have been without that law. So what we can do here, there is a team we can put together here. I don't care where you live. You can be for these coal miners being healthy after a day's work, after a year's work, after 10 years' work. And you don't want miners dying in this country at 40 years old and sometimes younger. And join with the rest of us here. We have black lung clinics throughout the coal fields. We have black lung organizations consisting of people who worked in the mines and have contracted this disease. We have people who support us on this. Joe Manchin himself has stood up for this, the funding of the black lung program in the legislation that was passed a couple of years ago. We can be, there's an old union zone. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? By the way, that was written by Coal Miners Way. And so let's stand together and say, well, so which side are we on? And well, I'm actually making an appeal here. Talk to your congressman. He may already be in agreement with this, or she might be in agreement with this. But make sure the pressure is put on those who are in Congress today, saying, well, let's not fund protection for coal miners.
Go up to your politician and ask him or her, what side are you on? Worker side?
A lot of things lead to politics.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Cecil, we could talk for hours. God bless you, man. I just love talking to you. We have to do this more often throughout 2024. And you are one fighter for your workers. There's no question. So you take care. Stay in touch. We're going to hit this pretty hard here on America's Workforce. Go to the national website, UMWA.org. UMWA.org. Cecil Roberts, General President since 1995. Got in the coal mines right after Vietnam in the 1970s. You stay safe, okay, brother?
Hey, brother. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Merrilee Logue will be joining us. Merrilee is the executive director of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association's National Labor Office. You're listening to the best of America's Workforce. Back in a few minutes. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LIUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LIUNA at LIUNA.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
This next segment brought to you by the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Now, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, a long time ago, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen their commitment to organized labor. Today, Blue Cross and Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care. Key word there, affordable. Partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. Let me repeat that. At Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. Now, right now, I am joined by Merrilee Logue. Now, Merrilee is the executive director of the National Labor Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. She comes to us with more than 30 years of experience in healthcare. That's a long time. Merrilee, welcome to America's Workforce.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that great introduction.
Well, hey, that's what I'm here for. I've been doing this for a long time. Believe me, very long time. Okay, Merrilee, to start us off, could you share a bit about your background and your current role at Blue Cross Blue Shield in the National Labor Office? I just like saying that, National Labor Office. Tell me more about this.
Thank you. So in my role, I lead the National Labor Office, or we call it the NLO. The NLO acts we're a liaison between all the unions and Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies. We want to make sure that we're really addressing the labor needs and make sure that everything we're developing and offering is aligned with that. Also, part of my role is I oversee the National Labor Office Board of Directors. Represents about 90% of the union members covered by Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies. And I have to be honest with you, Flash, I am so lucky to work with such respected leaders in the industry. This board of directors is really a wonderful group of people.
Very good. Good to hear that. Merrilee, I also see from your background that you have a bachelor's degree in secondary education and a master's degree in education administration. I have to ask you, was working in education what led you to the work that you're doing today with labor unions? I'm kind of interested in that. Can you share with us some details?
Well, kind of. I mean, I come from a family of teachers. My mother, my grandparents, all teachers. So it's the only job I ever wanted to do. I love teaching. But long story short, I had an opportunity to work on Broadway in New York City. It literally fell in my lap. And I had to take the opportunity. So I began in the early 90s working in the Actors Equity Building on Broadway shows, and I learned about the entertainment unions. I was very involved in the day-to-day operations of the business, which also included the health insurance, health care. And so eventually I knew that this was the path for me. So my next stop was working for an insurance carrier, and my first clients were school boards. Later on, I started working with Taft-Hartley unions, and I found my home, so to speak. And what I learned was I could use my teaching skills to help people understand the complex world of insurance and healthcare.
I see that you're working in the Actors Equity Building in New York City. Do you know Kate Schindel? We've had Kate Schindel on the show a couple of times. She's the president.
Only who she is, but no, I don't know her personally.
Okay, good. She's a fighter, great union leader, no doubt about that. Now, it's clear that you're passionate about the work that you're doing, Merrilee. Can you talk to me about your current work with the National Labor Office and the role of Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies? Can you give us some details on that?
Sure. You had mentioned earlier in the introduction about where our history began, and it began with the American worker. Almost 100 years ago in 1929, Blue Cross was created to support teachers in Texas find affordable, accessible health care. And then Blue Shield came about from the lumber and mining camps in the Pacific Northwest. And our mission then is the same today, and you had mentioned that, affordable health care accessible to everyone. Working with the unions is in our DNA. The labor world is always changing, so my office is laser focused on the specific needs of the American worker and making sure that we are delivering on that.
There you go. Well, thanks for sharing that background. I think it's helpful in understanding the work of the National Labor Office today. Can you give me some more insight on that?
Sure. You mentioned also, too, the National Labor Office started in 1965 to help show the commitment to labor and the unique needs, and we have been growing and thriving ever since.
You know, it's funny. You just shared with us two dates there of about 100 years ago, almost 1929, when Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies actually came into fruition. And then 1965, that's the year Medicare started under the Johnson administration. So two very interesting dates. 29, though, we had the Great Depression, the stock market crash at that time. So very significant dates in American history there. And dates that affected workers in different ways when you think about that. Well, when you talk about the National Labor Office's commitment to labor, can you tell our listeners what that means day to day? I mean, National Labor Office. I mean, help me out on that one.
Sure. And also I want to say, I don't think it's a coincidence that you mentioned those dates, and very significant dates for us and Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And that's what we try to do. We try to be, have the answer and be on the ready when it's needed. Right. For starters, we're located in Washington, D.C., which helps us actively engage in policy and labor activities. As you mentioned earlier, we serve over 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families. That's more than any other insurer, and we don't take that lightly, that responsibility. NLO represents 44 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, and so that's about 90% of that total union population. And our goal is to really work, collaborate with the internationals at that national level, while our local plans work closely with the unions in their local communities.
Boy, that is a lot. 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families in 44 states. Now, that large presence that you just referred to us on, can you help break that down? And your role, what does your work look like today, Merrilee?
So, Flash, simply, it's really three main components. Relationship building in this space, in labor, that's most important. Relationship building, education, and advocating. And that's how we see our role. We like to participate in a lot of union conferences, meetings, task force, so that we understand what the needs are, we can anticipate what the trends are. It is our job then, reverse, to make sure we take that understanding and communicate it back to Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies. For example, I sit on NAP2 opioid task force, where I get to meet with leaders in the building trades, and not just leaders, but all in the building trades, but also leaders that own companies. We all sit on this task force together so that we can understand what's happening on the job sites, and that we are involved in the solutions from the ground up.
Merrilee, I'm glad you brought up the North American Building Trades, NAB2, and we've had Sean McGarvey on the show a number of times. I just like that individual. He's got a lot of fire in his belly, and he's doing a really good job, especially with the diversity in the trades. I can only assume you've been working with his team pretty intently here over the years. Is that right?
Yes, that is, and I share the same sentiments as you with his leadership.
Okay, good to hear. Real good. Okay, the takeaway here, we're talking about relationship building, education, and advocating. Merrilee, I want to pick up on what we talked about, and my next question, you mentioned this idea of relationship building, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield wants to make sure healthcare is working for America's workers. That's so darn important. Building relationships within the healthcare space is critical to making this happen. Talk to me about that. Give me a little more insight into that, if you will. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Flash, you're right. Relationship building is core of what we do. And An example of that, and to kind of put this into perspective, one way we do this is by partnering with external health service vendors. These are what we call strategic alliance. Vendors that are in the healthcare space that are best in class at what they do and can deliver a quality product to labor. And for example, we see that in the trades, there is a desire for an increase of women in trades. This calls for benefits that are appealing to women. Fertility benefits is an example of that. Or we also see a high prevalence of cancer rates in our labor groups. And so we look to those vendors that help us with that education, prevention, and promoting that. We ensure these partners really support those needs of labor. Currently, we have 14 strategic alliances. They specialize in benefits like fertility and cancer, but also musculoskeletal, vision, dental, hearing, and a whole host of others that are important in the labor world and the benefits that they want to deliver to their membership.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now that's a lot of alliances, 14 of them, and strategic ones at that. Outside of these alliances, I have to ask you, Merrilee, how do you keep a pulse on the labor health needs of today?
So we have 5 advisory boards that our National Labor Office Board of Directors sit on, and these are created so that we're hearing the concerns and the needs of the labor market, not just at a national level, but at a local level as well. We're on the road, we're attending conferences, we're meeting with union leaders, we're talking to people that are making decisions on benefits, and we're very engaged in the conversation on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can follow all of us, as I mentioned before, at Blue Labor on both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll hit that again at the end of this conversation. So is there anything else you would like our listeners to know about the National Labor Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield?
I just want to reinforce that we're a separate entity from Blue Cross and Blue. We're part of Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies, but we sit as a separate entity, and we are created in the image of labor. Labor, as you know, is set up as an international with local affiliates. We mirror this. And thus it gives my office the ability to really tap into the strength of the National Blue system, but support at the local level as well, where the actual benefits are being delivered.
I see. That's interesting. Kind of gives you a little room for creativity there. I like that. Now, are there several different ways that Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are supporting labor? And I know we're going to talk about this more in detail throughout the year. This is the first of many conversations to come. Merrilee, can you give our listeners a preview on some of the topics that they might be hearing about?
Yes, and we're looking forward to that continued conversation and taking a deeper dive into some specific healthcare issues. I'll start with the big one, which is affordability. And we're really focused on cost-effective affordability and making sure that union members have access to that. Another key focus is health equity. We're actively engaged in working to eliminate health disparities by partnering with community organizations. We are advocating for tailored healthcare solutions to address the needs of everyone, not just one specific demographic group. And this is especially true when it comes to mental health. There are so many Americans that are underserved and don't have access, and this is really critical in our country that we address mental health, which is the third topic I want to expand on, and it's top of everybody's mind. With nearly 1 out of 5 U.S. Americans dealing with mental health conditions, we really need to address this, not only on affordability, but access. And so we recognize this. To give you an example, we are looking at partnering up nationally. An example of this would be the Boys and Girls Club of America, which is a recent partnership for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the mental health situation because and the pandemic clearly brought into national focus. So we're definitely going to pick up on that in future interviews. Now, to recap here, It sounds like the key issues listeners can be expecting more are affordability, health equity, and mental health. Really looking forward to hearing more about how Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are working to address these areas. These are hot topics in healthcare. But for right now, that's pretty much all the time we have. So I have to thank you for coming on the show. I love doing this show. I love talking to people that are making a difference. And clearly, Merrilee, you're making a difference here. Any closing thoughts on where our listeners can find you? I think that's the best way to wrap things up.
So I just want to say one thing. I work with an amazing, hardworking, talented team. And Flash, we start our day by listening to your podcast, and that's where we get a lot of our information. So thank you, and thank you so much for having me on. You can find our full calendar of events at bcbs.com/National Labor Office. And you can follow us at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and on X.
Well, Merrilee, you made my day. I didn't know you listened to me every day.
It's
not too often. It's not too often that I get to talk to my listeners. But this is
absolutely. Cool. The whole team, big fan.
This is cool. I love doing this show. This will be 26 years for me doing America's Workforce. And I'll be honest with you, this last year, you're on the right show. You are on the right show. This last year, we exploded. We had a 25% increase in listenership from 2022, and we're now in the top 1% of all podcasts. So you definitely got the audience that you're targeting here. And I want to wrap things up by, number one, thanking you. And those of you listening, you can learn more by following at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. Merrilee, Logue, you take care, and we'll be talking in a month or so, okay?
Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the painters and allied trades and the latest from the United Steelworkers. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.